Apple event and the Apple Silicon. This is our topic for the day. In the recent Apple event, they have released the new MacBooks and also released their own processor. And today we are going to talk about this latest chip, so stay tuned. First, they have revealed the Apple Silicon. So what is this Apple Silicon? Until the previous MacBooks, Apple had been using Intel's processor. So over the years, there was no performance change. We could only observe few changes in the design and they would provide the next gen Intel processors and nothing else. But this time, Apple has released their own processors, that is the Apple M1. So what is the advantage? This just isn't a CPU, it is a SoC, that is a system on chip. So what is this SoC? On the previous MacBooks, they had been using separate chipset for the CPU, separate chipset for the GPU, separate chipset for the Thunderbolt, etc. But every function had its own chipset. So in this SoC, all the chipsets are combined to form the single Apple M1. That is, the CPU, the GPU, the Thunderbolt, even the RAM is inside this single M1 chipset. Now, when we compare the M1 CPU with the previous gen MacBooks, the M1 has a 8-core CPU, whereas in the Intel based MacBooks in the previous gen had a dual core or a quad core CPU only. So these 8-core gives us a 2 times better performance than the previous gen MacBooks. The 8 cores are divided into 4 big cores and 4 small cores. The 4 big cores give us incredible performance. Apple has claimed it to give 2 times better performance than the previous gen MacBooks. These 4 big cores handle all the big applications like the heavy core performance demanding ones like editing, gaming and stuff. The other small core 4 cores take up less power and give efficient power to perform other tasks. So they have rocked in the CPU performance. In MacBook Air, they have claimed it to give 3.5 times better performance, whereas in the MacBook Pro, they have claimed it to give 2 times better performance than the previous gen MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro. Now, moving ahead with the GPU segment, Apple claims it to be the world's best and fastest integrated GPU ever built. They have provided an 8-core graphics in the MacBook Pro and a 7-core graphics in the MacBook Air. They haven't talked much about the graphics, so until they don't give any review units, we really can't talk about it much. So now we have talked about the CPU and the GPU. So moving ahead, they have provided us with a 16-core neural engine. So what does this neural engine do? It is used it uses the artificial intelligence and machine learning to complete the tasks, and they have provided a security chip which everyone knows. The RAM is not upgradable in these devices, so we will no longer be able to add the RAM. They have embedded the RAM inside the chipset, that is the unified RAM. So if you are buying the Apple Silicon MacBook versions, then you need to buy your desired RAM variant in the first, as you can't upgrade it in the near future. So this was the Apple Silicon. Now let's see how has it changed the product. Until now, Apple had been using the Intel's x86 architecture or the x64 architecture, but here Apple has used the ARM architecture this time, that is used in the mobiles. The ARM architecture is quite weak when compared to the Intel. So how have they achieved this processing power? So the Apple developers had been advised to make this chipset capable to run all the Apple's application beforehand, and they have been experimenting for an year and they have finally achieved this outcome. So you may ask that all the Intel based applications won't work on this? Well, Apple has made an emulator called the Rosetta 2. Emulators usually make the application slow, but Apple claims that if you use an Intel based application on the Rosetta 2 emulator, it will run faster than the Intel CPU based MacBooks. And this device is capable of running all the applications in the iPhones and iPads also. So basically you're carrying a phone with you as well at the same time. Now let's talk about the devices. Starting with the MacBook Air, it is priced at $93,000, so there is hardly a price difference. Currently the MacBook Air they are providing is a dual-core Intel i3 powered. Compared to this, the Apple Silicon gives a way better performance. The Apple Silicon has 8 cores, so when we compare 2 cores versus 8 cores, of course the 8 cores is an absolute beast. The GPU performance is good. In the current MacBook Air, it was powered by the Intel Iris Plus, but in the Silicon version, Apple claims their GPU to be better and faster than the Intel. So overall performance, the CPU is 3.5 times better and the GPU is 5 times better in the Apple Silicon variant. Since the processor is a 5nm, the battery life is excellent. They claim it to give 6 hours more battery life than the current MacBook Air with the Intel processor. The interesting fact about this device is that it doesn't have a fan. Since it is an ARM chip, Apple claims there is no requirement of cooling. It is required a little, but they claim it that the air around the device is enough to keep the device cool and stable. So it is a super quiet device and there is no chance of sound. So if you are into a really quiet devices, then this is the device for you. The MacBook Air is not a high performance application device. That is, it can be used just for regular day-to-day work. But this time, Apple has advertised it to perform high performance application. Since it doesn't have a fan, there are high chances that it will heat up. But this can be confirmed only when we get the unit. Now let's move ahead with the MacBook Pro. The interesting fact is both the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro have been given the same processor, that is the M1. So what makes it different from the MacBook Air? But the Pro has an advantage. The MacBook Pro has a cooling system. The design and the internals are all the same. The MacBook Pro comes with the same M1 chipset and the same design, but since it has cooling, it can be used for editing videos or playing high graphics demanding games too. You can buy the Intel based MacBook Pro as well in the 2020, but they have thrown the 8th gen Intel processor and replaced with the M1 chipset and perfectly matched the price at 1.2 lakhs. And if you want the high-end CPU, there is the 10th gen Intel available for 1.6 lakh. But I feel that the 10th gen Intel processor model is not an option to buy since Apple claims the M1 to be so powerful that it's likely to outperform the Intel's 10th gen processor in every way. Next device is the Mac Mini. It should be connected to the monitor and is powered by the same M1 chipset. It is as small as a set-top box in size and the other internals are same. Note that for $63,000 you are only getting the Mac Mini. You need to buy the monitor and other accessories separately. These are the products that Apple unveiled in the event. So if you like the video, please subscribe to the channel for latest technology unboxing, review and tips. Our aim is to reach 50 subscribers within this month. So as you can see, it's just 25 more. Thank you for watching.